Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining me today. If you know me, great to see you again, even though I can't see you. And if you don't know me, my name's Huw Thomas, and I'm going to be leading this session today. Nice nugget of change leadership development, hopefully, is what you're going to get out of this session today. So, welcome. So for those that don't know me, as I said, my name's Huw Thomas. My expertise really is in change, both at an individual, a team, and an organizational level. I tend to, in my day job as a consultant, I help executive teams in particular lead, manage, and govern organizational change at scale. And that also involves me sometimes working with middle managers, training them up, and coaching individual leaders across enterprises to boost their overall ability to drive change at scale and implement their strategies successfully. I've been doing this for quite a long time. I started out and worked as a training expert and a change manager, but in the last sort of 8 to 10 years, I've mostly worked with senior leaders in their teams on building this capability. So that's a bit about me if you don't know what I do. And I know change is a big thing for many organizations at the moment. Changes can be wanted, they can be unwanted, and strategy is also a challenging thing with so much uncertainty. And we can feel overwhelmed by everything that's on our plates and things we're thinking about sometimes. And so one of the most important things I see for the role of a leader, whether you're leading an organization, a division, a business unit, a team, or a project, whatever it is you're leading, setting direction is such a critical element of that. Setting clear direction that aligns and drives massive amounts of commitment for people to understand where we're going and what success looks like. So we aren't just out there doing stuff and delivering deliverables and a bunch of activities. We're actually driving towards an outcome. We're super motivated and excited about that outcome, and there's a strong push to achieve that. So that's what this session's all about. I'm going to share my screen with you today. Hopefully you can use the chat functionality and feel free to ask questions on that. I'll try and keep an eye on it. If you can't use the chat functionality for any reason, I probably can't help you, but other than to say sorry about that. But feel free to ask a question in the chat at any time. We're going to go for about 30 minutes of content, and there's a bit of time for questions as well. So a 45-minute session total. So hopefully you can see, I'm going to check I'm sharing the right thing. 1 second. Okay, hopefully you can see the screen I'm sharing. So I'm going to start with a bit of inspirational wisdom from the great Henry David Thoreau. He says, "The world is but a canvas to our imagination." The reason I include this quote, I think strategic thinking and direction setting involves a bit of imagination, and visionary leaders have this great knack, as in particular human capability that most other animals on the planet aren't capable of. We can imagine things that aren't there. We can see patterns. We can imagine a future which is greater, brighter, and we can talk about that and describe it, which is how we create books and movies and images and things like that. And inspirational leaders in business are able to guide people to a bigger, brighter future. And I like to use this quote in that light to think about it as an imaginary exercise to create direction. And what it does when we as leaders imagine that world and we describe it to people with a bit of substance to back it up, as we'll talk about today, it creates that same spark inside their brains and that sense of imagination about what we can become together as a team, as an organization, or perhaps even as a society if you apply it really broadly. So it's a bit of creativity involved in setting direction, I think. So a few problems and challenges. Today, many organizations have vague strategy. The strategy can be confusing. Sometimes they dilute strategy. And I see a diluted strategy as one that tries to do too many things and it becomes confusing. And by diluting our efforts, we fail to deliver and execute effectively on any one of those things. And that can lead to failed strategy. In a change context, I think humans suffer from change hysteria. I'm thinking of trademarking that term, something I talk about, where we kind of get overwhelmed by change or overloaded, and we think we need to change everything at once. And so as a result of that, we change too many things and we come up against a ton of resistance, and it's impossible for us to do too much at once. Or we find change so challenging in our minds that it actually becomes really difficult in practice. And there's psychological reasons for that, for that kind of innate resistance we have for change. And overall, I think we see occasionally incapable leadership, leaders that aren't able to set direction, think strategically. Sometimes they're too laissez-faire and hands-off and absent from their teams and projects and what they actually need to hear from them. And leadership is somewhat optional. We have tasks and emails and all these types of things we have to do and we have to respond to, or it feels like we do. But getting out there and communicating direction is sometimes seen as an optional thing, which we'll get to eventually if we ever find the time, and we never do. Leaders can be disengaged too at a middle manager level in particular. That's common because they feel frustrated, they don't understand the strategy and leadership, or they don't have the skills to step up to the leadership required. And we see those leadership failures as a result. So I think clear direction can help strategy, change, and leadership across organizations. It can help, as I said, at an organizational level, at a project level, at a team level, and really get crystal clear on what we're trying to achieve and get people rallied around that. And I think you can even use it at an individual level. Many people that I coach, when I start a coaching session or I send them some pre-work to ask them about what their goals are, they aren't sure about what they want. Or they don't have goals, or they're kind of going through the motions. And as a result, there's a lack of urgency and excitement and engagement in a sort of ambitious mission because they don't have this kind of future directional clarity about what they want to be, what they want to become, what their future identity is, or what they really want out of their career and their life. And I help them sort of clarify that. But sometimes I do come and coach people who have that clear direction, know exactly what they want, and it's about really how to get it then. So the power of direction setting is clear for strategy, change, and leadership. And for me, direction is all about clarity. And this is the word I use, a major C word. And I use a few C words in one of the behavior change models I use, but clarity is where it all starts. And I always say, if our direction isn't clear, we won't be motivated and we'll never arrive. And so sometimes in our careers, in our organizations, in our teams, we can often feel like we're drifting along and we're going through the motions, or we're busy doing stuff, but we aren't really clear on what we're working towards. And we don't have a bold enough vision on how to get there. The Center for Creative Leadership, the CCL, if you want to look them up, a great body of knowledge and thought leaders in leadership, have a great model, which is called the DAC model. And what they say is the three things or primary things that leaders should be responsible for with their teams is direction, alignment, and commitment. And that inspired a model that I use, which I'll talk about later. But direction is where it all starts, and leaders need to provide that with great crystal clear clarity. An example I always use is, imagine if you were setting off on a road trip, say with your kids or family or friends, and you ask them to get in the car and set off on this journey with you, and you don't tell them where you're going. Or you say, oh, we're going somewhere up the coast, but you don't sort of say where. Can you imagine the complaining from the kids and from the friends in the back seat? Why would they want to jump in the car for hours and drive with you without knowing where the hell they're going and why? So we want to give people that direction. When we have that direction, we know where we're going. There's a sense of excitement if you go jump in that car and hit the road. And that's what drives a lot of that excitement, engagement, and it helps people prepare mentally and practically for the mission and the journey ahead. And it helps you, pack the right things and not pack the wrong things. So you avoid wasted effort along the way as well. And one thing I love about professional sports teams and learning from them, I know in business we talk about it a lot, some people get sick of sports analogies, but I don't, is a sports team, a professional sports team at the start of the season, it's very clear what the goal is in a long-term sense. And most teams will tell you they just want to win the grand final or win the competition or tournament that they're playing in. And then they have clear short-term goals, which is to win the game ahead, the next game that they have on their horizon. And that clarity around just winning that game drives a massive amount of urgency, teamness, and sort of everyone marching in the same direction, and also helps them prioritize and push away anything which is getting in the way of that. So avoiding distractions, digressions from those particular goals. And I think if we could apply that same thinking in organizations, imagine how engaged your people might be. If we knew exactly what the job to be done was in this 12 months, or maybe it's 2 years, 3 years, whatever the longer term horizon is, and then we know kind of week to week exactly what we need to focus on to achieve that. And maybe it's month to month, quarter to quarter, and various horizons, however you want to plan. But there's that clarity there. And what that creates is a sense of urgency, a sense of alignment among your people, and a commitment, because they know that the successful direction and that outcome that you're going to achieve is worth it. And it's about prioritizing, and helps them prioritize what they need to do each week. And Stephen Covey, the author of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, said, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And I love that quote because it's almost silly in its simplicity, but really calls out the importance of prioritization. But direction is where it starts if you're trying to prioritize. Without that clear direction, it's really hard to know what to prioritize. A study by the University of Netherlands says that teams that exhibit goal clarity demonstrate greater short-term performance and longer-term sustainability in a range of standard business metrics. Bit of a mouthful. And this is just one of dozens, perhaps even hundreds of studies if you look up goal clarity and team performance and things like that. It's proven over and over again to the link between that goal clarity and the performance of teams. This is just one study. Now, let me get into a model that I use, and this is the kind of core model which I hope you can take away and use in anything you're trying to achieve in your teams, your organizations, your projects, and even personally in your personal life or careers. You can apply this. It applies to behavior change. It applies to clarity about what we need to do and strategy and direction, all these wonderful things I'm talking about. So clarity is also all about clearly defined change. And as I touched on, if we don't know exactly what we want, how can we possibly get it? So imagine or think of this 2 axes. On the y-axis, we've got at the top the abstract, and at the bottom, we have the concrete. Now, think of the abstract as the kind of right brain, creative, imaginative, visionary type of thinking, and the concrete is really your rational, planning, left brain style of thinking. So that's the y-axis. And on the x, we have the present on the left and the future on the right. And I use this to kind of plot out 4 main things which humans need to understand, to have clarity in our direction and the change we're trying to make, whether it's, as I said, in a team level, individual level, or project or organization. Whatever the case, wherever there's people, you need these 4 things. And it starts with vision. Now, this isn't groundbreaking. You've probably heard the word vision a million times. But what's important is where this sits in the 4 quadrants here. I think without vision, we're uninspired. And vision sort of simplifies the complex into an emotive, imaginary future that we can orient ourselves to. And it's something we care about and value. So choosing the way we describe that can bring out inspiration. So vision is all about inspiration, but it is a little bit abstract and it is very future focused. So if I sort of say to my team, and well, you know, if we want to be, we're at a certain level and we want to be in a better place in the future, you know, I can use this sort of language, like maybe it's imagine 12 months from now and we're the most high performing team in this organization. Imagine we're just completely on the same page. We have a fantastic culture. We're really clear on the behaviors we want. You know, we've put a charter in place and we know how to communicate with each other, and it's like a well-oiled machine. And everything we do, we manage to succeed at it. That's where we want to get this team to. You could use some language like that, which is just, I just made that up on the spot. Didn't prepare that earlier, I was just winging it. But It's that kind of language which is creative and just describing what it looks and feels like. That's what I'm talking about when it comes to vision. Now, visions can sound a bit airy-fairy and fluffy if we don't talk about the left side of the top equation here, which is the problem. So showing we understand the problem is important and linking that with the vision. So if we don't get the problem, we may not be open to changing. Often we go through our days and our weeks kind of accepting a status quo that we're living in and that we're operating in, and we seem to be quite content with that. And that's a normal human behavior. And I could talk about the psychology and the evolutionary reasons for that in maybe a future webinar. But to get people open to changing and to putting in discretionary effort or to thinking differently, and the cognitive effort that's required with that, we have to create a degree of dissatisfaction or discontentment. So I think talking about the problem creates that, but actually having a really detailed, crystal clear understanding of the problem is what is required. Otherwise, humans have this sort of tendency to think, well, if it ain't broke, why fix it? So explaining the problem adds a bit of credibility to our vision. And it answers the questions, why should we do this? And why bother? John Cotter, the famous Harvard Business School change leadership expert, wrote several books on leading change, a bit of an inspiration for me. He says we have to create change and get people motivated to transform an organization, we need to create dissatisfaction with the status quo. You actually have to get people to say, what we're doing isn't good enough. We need to do better. Well, this can't continue. And you need everyone to be thinking that. So it's not just you knowing the problem. You need everyone else to understand that and to feel that sense of discontent. That's what drives us to be better, to want to strive for the vision. And so it kind of starts with understanding the problem. And then you can describe your vision as the kind of answer to that. And that gets people motivated in the general direction. An example, just to share, I worked on a banking project once, and we were implementing a credit risk system to a bunch of commercial bankers, sophisticated audience. And their thinking was, when we initially announced it, was, oh, we're replacing the old system, which has got a bad user interface with a nice, better looking user interface. And it's basically like replacing the same system. And but that wasn't going to justify the business case. And we were saying with this project, well, actually, that's not what it's all about. It's actually about these additional features which you need to know about. And we talked about the current problem with the existing system, which was it didn't yield good enough data and analytics, which didn't enable us to have good conversations with clients, identify new lending opportunities, and be like a trusted advisor to them, because of what it did is crunch their balance sheet, profit and loss statements and things like that, and spit out all sorts of reports. And so bankers couldn't do that in the existing system, but they could in the new one, in addition to all the existing things they could do. So we had to talk about this thing as a problem. We're not able to be effective advisors to our clients' business because we don't have that data. And we just talked about that problem a great deal, to the point where they realized, oh, we need to fix this. We need this new system. And there was a sort of a pull from them because they were clear on what that problem was. And then we were able to express the vision around bankers being not just a lending seller, but a strategic advisor to their clients. And we can share these great insights and be a great partner, which is kind of attractive to them. That was just one example. Now, let's look below the line for a moment. So I've talked about the abstract. What's the problem here? Create some discontent, and then talk about the vision and some inspiration in the future. Next, it's all about metrics. So this adds weight and makes it easy to track. So without metrics, we can't track progress or when we've succeeded in driving any sort of directional shift. So a metric is essentially a measurable outcome. If you think of any kind of outcome and you add a number, a percentage, or even a deadline to it, and it makes it measurable. So looking at the current metrics that define the problem sort of proves that there is a problem. And we can say to people, well, this is the issue here in these numbers, and that proves that there's an issue. And we sort of say, well, if we could shift those numbers to this future metric, then it's going to create a significant amount of value. And it in particular appeals to people who are a little bit more left brain. We're all a little bit left and right brain. I know left and right brain is a bit of a pseudoscience thing. It's not a neurobiological real thing in a lot of ways. It's an oversimplification at best. But we all have this sort of left brain mentality. We like the vision and abstract, but we need the sort of concrete numbers as well. And particularly certain kinds of people will need that in your teams, in your projects, and the stakeholders you serve. So having the clear metrics about this is really important. An example I always use here is, and just to think of the good and the bad versions of this is often in New Year's around early January after, splurging on bad diet and drinking too much over the holidays. What's the number one resolution we all make? It's we want to get fitter and healthier. And the problem with saying something like that is there's no way of measuring that. If I say I want to get fitter, that could mean a number of things. Should I start lifting weights? Should I go start walking every day? Should I change my diet? I don't really know what to do with that. It's unclear. It might be sort of visionary where we go, oh, yeah, it's going to be great to be fitter. But I don't really know what it looks like until I define the problem, have a clearer vision, and sort of set some metrics around it. So if I said to myself, well, I feel bad about, my health, maybe it's hard to button my jeans. I don't like the way I look in the mirror, and I want to imagine this future where I feel great, about myself. I can run without sort of running out of breath. I can walk up the stairs without running out of breath, or whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. And I think about that sort of future, and then I go, okay, what's the metrics that's going to define that? And I might decide, for example, and this is more tangible and effective direction than simply saying I want to get fitter and healthier, is to say, okay, well, I want to lose 3 kilograms of body fat by the end of February. If I say something specific like that, that's the kind of metric definition of success. And what that does for me, other than to make it really measurable and at the end of February, I can define, well, did I achieve that or not? It actually determines the actions that I'm going to take leading up to that. Well, if it's about losing weight, it's not about bulking up and building muscle or being able to run a marathon, then that sort of gives me more clarity around what I should and shouldn't be doing. Potentially, I could then even just type into ChatGPT, a 43-year-old male trying to lose 3 kilos in 2 months, give me a meal plan and an exercise plan. And so just to use that as an example, and ChatGPT is pretty good for that. But having that clarity around what I want and what the metric is that defines success really helps me define what activities I need to put in place. And similarly, if you're working on a project, say, for example, maybe a project that requires significant amount of stakeholder support because you're expecting resistance, and that resistance could be the biggest risk with the project, you might set a goal or a metric around stakeholder support and set a deadline for that. And you might say, okay, where the first engagement with these managers is they're not very supportive. And I want to set a goal within 3 months. I want to get them to a point where it's like they're 80% supportive. And how I measure that, you could survey them, you could do things like that. On one project, what I did is I had a meeting with a manager or a set of managers, area managers. And at the end of each discussion, after I talked to them about the project, what I was trying to achieve, what was going to be involved, and the impacts for their people, I said, on a scale of 1 to 10, how supportive are you of this project? And, if they said, sort of a 6, I'd say to them, okay, what's it take to get you to a 10? And they'd say, well, I need to be convinced of X, Y, Z. I need more information. I need to know what the plan is, yada, yada, yada. I'd say, okay, I'm going to get that to you in the next 2 months. And we'd work on doing that. And I asked all the area managers this. And then in that second meeting I had with them, after sharing all that information, talking it through with them, I said, okay, now what's your degree of support out of 10? And it might have gone up to an 8 or a 9. And I'd track this and write it down. So quicker than a survey, it's just a quick check-in, but it's working with structure, thinking about a metric in my own mind is their support level out of 10. And I just applied it to that. I knew that support was critical to that project. And that was just one of the many metrics I used on that project. But you want to think about what is it that matters most? What's going to drive the most success? And then measure that somehow. And you could be in a sales team where you say, oh, we've just got to make more sales, make more money. And it's like, well, is it more sales or is it the size of the sale? If it's the size of the sale, then we need to be maybe training and coaching our salespeople to work out how to sell more in per sale that amplify the size of each sale. And that's different. And if it's about more sales, then maybe it's about getting more clients, more leads. And that's going to be a completely different set of behaviors and actions, which is going to drive that. So getting your metrics right is so key. You can't be too vague, you can't be too high level, and you can't be just visionary. You got to break it down to the next level. So feel free to take a photo of that model. I could probably, I think I'll share with you a link to this model after this session as well. And you also get the recording of this so you can refer back to it. But I hope you're starting to think about something you want to change, or some project you're leading, or maybe it's your team. You want to get them to a next level of maturity over the next 6 to 12 months. Start thinking about what's the problem that you're trying to address. What's the vision that's going to inspire you and inspire them to be greater and to make that change successful? And what are the kind of metrics within your team? And those metrics could be business focused, or they could be people focused, like the stakeholder support example I gave. It could be capability focused. And you want to make those things measurable. You may not go and measure it. They may not be perfectly measurable, but you need to be somewhat measurable. And as I said, the metric is such a key thing. And a metric is just an outcome where you've basically added a number, percentage, or a deadline. That tends to be the easy way of framing what makes something measurable. So start thinking about that. And it would be great if you even wrote down on a piece of paper at some point later today, while this stuff is fresh in your mind, and trying to fill out these 4 boxes. So as you're thinking about that and preparing to do that task, hopefully, to apply this, let's talk through a few barriers to clear direction setting. These are important to know when you see them. And they're kind of excuses sometimes, but they're really understandable. I know what it's like to work in a big organization with tons of demands and a full inbox and all that sort of stuff. So I think the big one is a lack of thinking time. It requires deep thought to really get clear on direction and what's the metrics we need. That's a big one, particularly when we're super, super busy, which everyone is all the time. Operational short-term obsession. We think too much week to week, even month to month, and we aren't thinking about, well, what's greatness look like for us in 12 months, or in 3 years, or in 5 years, maybe even 10 years, I think is even good to think about. I often think about the kind of person I want to be in 10 years. It's very vague. I don't have a clear metric on it, but I have a bit of a vision and a rough idea of some metrics. And how to be a good dad is another one I often think about. Like, what are the metrics of success week to week, but also in the long term? You know, one is I often ask myself is, what do I want my kids to say about me in 20 years' time? You know, and I think about those positive things that I want them to say about me and the impact I had on their life. And that's something which is a bit of a visionary thing I do for myself. Anyway, digressing a little bit there. Overwhelming people with peripheral issues. This is a huge one. We often talking about relationships and drama and politics and nice to have pet projects, which are often getting in the way of what the most important thing is, because we aren't clear on what the direction is. So we get sidetracked easily. We sort of chase the shiny ball as it shows up and bounces across the road in front of us, instead of just keeping our eye on the prize of what's really, really important. Memory. People forget stuff. We forget what the direction is, the goals, the vision, the metrics that are making a difference. We have to continually remind ourselves. And if you're a leader, this is one of your key roles. Don't assume people remember what you told them 6 months ago. Chances are they don't. A lack of imagination. I talked about this big word, or Henry David Thoreau talked about it at the start of this session. It is an imagination process, being visionary and setting clear direction. You've got to think beyond the daily grind, the operational issues, the things which you get bogged down in, and just push all that aside for a moment and imagine a future better world, or a better world for yourself, your team, your organization, and your project at the very least. Sometimes we fear failure, and I think we're afraid of sort of big aspiration and boldness. We don't like to go big because we're always thinking about, well, let's just be realistic, right? And what about all these extraneous factors which are going to stop us? The most successful entrepreneurs, business leaders, world-changing political leaders, all of those kinds of people around the world are fearless and they're bold in their aspirations and they're thinking around, relentlessly around what that vision looks like. So don't be afraid to be bold. And it doesn't matter if you fall short and you fail. The importance is that it brings out your best in the moment and brings out everyone's best in the moment, and discretionary effort and excitement and urgency and all those things. And it's often more about the journey than it is about whether you succeed in that metric or not, but having the metric is useful. Not backing yourself or your people. Again, linked to that sort of boldness. I think that's really important. Sometimes your people will have doubt. You got to back them, put some air in their tires, fuel them with some energy, and bringing that energy into your conversations as being a positive influence in their mind, reminding them that they're actually capable of far more than they realize. And sometimes you got to remind yourself that too, whether you say it into the mirror or get some confident person to tell you. That can help. So there's lots of barriers to direction setting there. We need to be mindful of those, and they're understandable. It's okay if we forget. It's okay if we become operationally focused, but we need to refocus ourselves from time to time. It can help to have an outside influence to help us with this. I think coaches and consultants are good for that. I'm unbiased, obviously, but I have my own coaches and consultants which help me in my business and what I'm trying to do. So big fan of that. I love this quote from Steve Jobs. I know he's the most overquoted guy in business. He is a visionary leader. He's not a great people leader. People who work with him say he was tough, but I would say he's a fantastic visionary leader who thought beyond any limitations. I love this quote about simplicity, and I think it's really pertinent to setting direction. He said, that's been one of my mantras: focus and simplicity. Simple can be harder than complex. You have to work hard to get your thinking clean to make it simple. But it's worth it in the end, because once you get there, you can move mountains. Focus and simplicity. I think that's one of the biggest challenges for organizations today. And if you can crack that nut as a leader, if you can simplify things down into this clear direction, which I think this model I've shared with you does, understand the problem, describe it clearly, create discontent, have an inspiring vision, and know the metrics you're trying to shift, and pushing aside anything that gets in the way of that. That's an incredible skill to have, I think, in this modern world we're working in. I've got a couple of examples to share with you just for thinking and get the creative juices flowing. I don't want to project too much, but before I do, just a quick plug for something I'm standing up next year. It's called the Change Mavericks, and it's all about standing out and leading with influence and adaptability. It's going to be a regular group that gets together with me, and there'll be regular development sessions, which will be recorded live. They're going to be interactive, not just webinars like this one, which is a bit one way. And there'll be group coaching and ask me anything sessions. There'll be unique, inspiring thought leadership content, which I'll be sharing and bringing in from different sources and using my own thinking as well. And there'll be peer sharing in it as well with like-minded people. It's going to be fun, energizing, mind-expanding community. If you're interested in that, you can email me. I'll keep anyone who's registered for this session, is involved in this session, in the loop about it. So you'll get an invitation. If you want to register your early interest, there'll probably be a limit to numbers, but I'm trying to rally people the next couple of months. You can scan that QR code, and that should take you to my contact page. You can express your interest. So, quick plug. That's a bit of an advertising interlude. Now, some examples. Now, these aren't perfect examples, and I want to emphasize here, with that 4-box model, it's more important that you just understand those 4 boxes than having some crisp, clear statement, like a vision statement a company has on their website. You don't have to have perfect wording for it. It can help to have the great, really well thought out wording if you're emailing 1,000 people about it. And having a good comms message is really important. But the important thing is that you understand it and you're having conversations with people about it to make sure they understand it. So the language can be important, but it's not everything. But I wanted to share these concise examples which sort of touch on some of the concepts. They don't have all 4 boxes in every statement, but I just wanted to share them as an indicative example of some powerful messages. So this one: a computer on every desk in every home. Can anyone guess who came up with that one? Feel free to enter in the chat. And the second one, making humanity multi-planetary, which is pretty epic. So these are both huge visionary statements. The first one you may have recognized is actually Microsoft. Bill Gates came up with that one. And you can see how it's visionary. You can imagine that, like this is something they're striving for. And it's pretty much measurable, because he said in every home. So that's almost creating that number element there. And obviously that's impossible to achieve, but it does create a sense of what the purpose of the company is. And making humanity multi-planetary, of course, is SpaceX. And again, it's measurable. So do we have humans on multiple planets? That's kind of measurable. And it's also a bit of a visionary statement. Now, it doesn't talk about the problems and things like that, but it is an example of the sort of visionary type statements relevant to the boxes we talked about, and a metric. Here's another example. This is at a team or business unit level. And it says, to be the ultimate team known for high performance and personal growth that everyone in our division wants to work in. This means backing the best for promotion and never accepting poor behaviors and standards. This is paraphrasing a quote from a team charter I developed for a team I managed in a large organization. And we sort of worked this out together after some discussion, and then I sort of came up with this. And it was really energizing for the team, and we sort of had this powerful vibe that came from it. So I always point back to that as an example. Again, it's all not perfectly measurable. There were some measures which came out of it. I had noticed early in the process of managing this team, there were 2 people, and I said my goal was to try and get them promoted within 12 months because I felt they were just about ready. And so I put tons of effort into mentoring them and sponsoring their promotion, building them up on their projects, coaching them, and building their capability. And I also had a contractor in that team whose behaviors weren't acceptable. They weren't aligned with the culture we wanted. And so in accordance with the charter, I ended their contract early. I felt the need to do that because it was bad for the team. It didn't align to the charter and what we were trying to achieve. So sometimes it can guide those tough decisions. By the way, when that person left, I had something like 15 expressions of interest of people wanting to join the team, and I chose the best one. So ended up in a good place as a result of having that clarity around what this team was about. This one's from a transformation project, paraphrasing a little bit, but it's from a large not-for-profit. I had about 2,000 people going through a digital transformation. I helped them define this, and it says customers expect a digital experience today, and we're not currently providing it. The problem. And then we said we will be a digital leader in our industry when 70% of our customer transactions and service interactions are through digital channels within 4 years. They had a real problem with financial sustainability. They were losing money, not breaking even. And they had a giant call center of people that was constantly on the phone to customers, rebooking, rescheduling things, and they were implementing a digital portal and all these types of things. So we had to set this bold ambition and this clear metric to drive lots of behaviors, and also just set the expectation with people around what the impact's going to be to the organization and how it needs to change kind of urgently to meet their goals. And there's a whole bunch of other wording which was around that as well. Here's one other quick example of a culture change. This was in an organization, very bureaucratic public sector organization. I pointed out they had this cultural issue which was preventing progress in a number of different projects, and subsequently led to this culture change. And we articulated this, and there was a lot more to it. This was battle that would fit on the slide, but there was some key messages there which we put into place. We described the problem as poor meeting culture stifling our people and our impact. And the leader said, I want our people to feel fulfilled by the workday, not drained by it. And from today onwards, every meeting must distribute an agenda before and actions after. They must start and finish on time. We must not accept meetings that fail to do so. And it's really unequivocal. There was a bunch of other rules around the culture as well that we put in place. And we're really, really clear about what success looked like and what was measurable. So saying every meeting must have, an agenda and actions, that's measurable. As soon as you don't do it for one, you can tell you're falling short there. So having that sort of measurability in the vision as well, but also some power words like, I want people to feel fulfilled by the workday, not drained by it. That sort of hits the emotive side of the visionary quadrant of the clarity model. This is another one of a coachee of mine who said, when I asked them, you know, what are you trying to achieve? And they said, I want to be known as one of the top 5 chief marketing officers in the country in 5 to 10 years. And I was like, awesome, let's do it. Not all my coaches have that kind of clarity. This one was super, super clear on it. And it was that helped sort of guide us on what we needed to do to get them there in the short term and set them on the right trajectory and continue them going that way. So applying the model, this is a few steps which you can go through and just to help you put it in place. First of all, think about what you want and what matters most. And I say what you want because I think that sometimes as leaders, we don't take enough ownership. We're sort of waiting for what others want or waiting to be told what the performance objectives are and things like that. But put all that process aside and think about, what do I want for this project? What's going to define success? What's my vision for it? What are the metrics I think are going to matter most to deciding what success looks like? And bring that into it and lead that process. Consider where you're currently at, whether it's you as an individual, team, organization, or the project, or your stakeholders on the project and where you need to get them to. Complete the 4-box model, which I shared with you. Number 4 is a big one. I'm big on this, and commit to it. Sometimes we keep the net wide. We don't focus and hone in on what the direction is we want. What are the metrics? And we sort of get distracted and we can't commit to any one thing. So we try to do too many things. Commit to a concise vision and metrics for your team or project. Share it with people and talk about it and see what their reactions are. Observe their response and refine it as a result. If you talk in a visionary way about the problem, about the vision of the future, and you see people's eyes light up and they're sort of doing this one in the meeting, you know you're kind of connecting with them. If they're sort of leaning back and scratching their head and going, yeah, nah, you're going to have a bit of a barometer there of what you need to tweak and change. So try it out with some people and then refine it. So this is just one step in a model I've developed, which I describe it as a way of changing anything. It's all about clarity in the start. Second level is commitment, which is about attitudes, beliefs. Capability comes next, which is knowledge and skills. Capacity, which is managing time, priorities, and sacrifices to make sure you make change happen. And the 5th is conscientiousness, which is about discipline, follow through, embedding, and creating new habits. This is a model I developed for behavior change in organizations. I've written a brief blog about it, which I can also share with you after this. So today's session's all been about that clarity. If you're interested in the other parts of it, I run a workshop. It's a half-day session, which can be for senior leaders, middle managers, just about anyone. And it covers these 5 elements, and you learn how to apply this model to make any sort of behavior change happen, either in an individual, team, or organizational level. And in the Change Mavericks, we'll probably be diving into some of these topics next year. So that's just a bit of a teaser. But clarity is really the first step to driving change at scale. If you're interested in staying in touch, just before we wrap up, scan this QR code, another QR code, to subscribe to my blog. In that blog, I send you weekly articles and thought leadership, unique IP, which I create every single week on the topic of change, strategy, leadership, and I also share executive white papers, podcasts, webinar invites like this one. Some of you might have found that on my blog, and subscriber-only growth opportunities. So you get the first to find out about unique things that I'm putting out there. So feel free to scan that, stay in touch, and keep hearing some of my thinking on this topic. And that takes us right to 12:15. Thank you, everyone, for today. If you have any questions, I didn't see any questions come in the chat. We've hit the 45-minute mark, which was my metric for finishing this on time. Feel free to stay in touch. Send me an email. I always like to talk to people. Happy to have a chat, a coffee, coaching session, just a strategy session. If you want me to talk to anyone in your organization, stay in touch, let me know. And that's the email, my inquiry email, or hit me up on the website. Some of you have my personal work address too. So feel free to stay in touch. But thank you everyone for attending this session today, and good luck setting an inspiring, clear direction for your people, your project, and your organization. See you soon, everyone.